Hello, everyone. Is everyone in?
Hi, Dr. Ayad.
Hello. You had an issue to open it, so
Right here.
I think now it's okay.
Yeah, I'm in.
Hello, Professor Wolfgang.
Hello, finally I'm here. Was this my mistake or yours?
No, mine.
Ah, that makes me calm. That's good.
Yeah. It's mine.
I love your mistakes.
Yeah. It's a Zoom problem, I guess. And mine as
Okay.
well. More.
Well, as long as it is not my mistake, I'm happy. Yeah. So I guess we are waiting for more people, don't we?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is more my mistake. I had an issue.
روحي ورجيها. قالت لي خديه تاخذ السكنة روحي. السكنة مش بنت كبيرة علي. خلص روحي قسكها. روحي تخافي منها. يارا.
Hi, everybody.
Apparently, all of us used Khaled's link, so most of us were renamed with Khaled. It's better that everybody renames themselves.
So what are we waiting for? For reorganization? Because I have 5 Khaleds here. Is this?
I think, Professor, you can start, no problem, I think. I will just, I'm
Aha.
switching recording from computers, but I don't think this will affect, you can start.
Okay, so you are playing with computers and I do the work. Is this okay?
Yeah, so if I, in like 5 minutes or something like that. But I will be here online, so just so we are recording, I'm recording from one computer to other.
Okay.
But you can continue.
And well, you
start.
enjoy your computer games and I
Yeah.
start the
Yeah.
lecture. And this is okay because I have like, I don't know how many Khaleds
You
here.
have 16 now. 16 people are in.
No, not all of them are Khaled. There are
No,
also other people.
Dr. Iyad,
Hello,
I think,
Khaled.
hello, I think the problem, Dr. Luis asked for the link. I sent it to him. And all they joined by my link. This is the problem.
Is this a problem or doesn't it matter?
As you like, I don't know.
So you think someone who's not in is because of the link?
Yes, it's a personal link, not. I thought it's general link, but it seems. But maybe when someone want to participate next, you will have problem with the names.
Okay, no problem. It's okay, while they are in, it's fine if they can enter.
Yes, okay.
So I think it's okay if they entered, right? Yeah, so it's fine.
Yes.
But why the normal link did not work? I don't understand. Matrix did not want them. It's okay.
If you want,
it works with me.
Yes, yes, you can send it again the another link and yes, now it's good. Luis Pina changed it. It's Luis.
Oh, okay.
I think no problem now. Yes.
Okay. Okay. So it seems the matrix was upset, but now it's working. So yeah, Professor, you can start. No problem. I will switch to the other computer to make sure that other people are in. But you can start.
Okay, so what I have is 60. I have 16 participants, and about half of them are Khaled Bedaya.
No, they're fixing it. I see them
I
normal.
see 16.
No,
They only need to rename themselves, just because we all use the
okay.
special name.
Yeah, but I see them.
Good.
I see them the same. I don't see double.
Okay, well, I don't mind. So you want me to start and I start. Is this okay?
For me, it's fine. But yeah, okay. We can ask.
We are not missing people, so we can start.
Yeah.
Well, we should start because it's 20 minutes past.
Yeah.
Okay, so please allow me to share the screen.
I asked them to give their original names.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, now we have sharing, Professor.
Okay, here we go. Yeah, okay, fine. So the only thing is that I cannot see my own screen. Will this change? I don't know. Well, we will see. Okay, so everybody can hear me and everybody sees the screen, okay? Good. Yes, so then I start because we lost already a lot of time, and I have like 70 slides or something, so that means more than half of the slides that I prepared for you. And this is my last session with you, so therefore I better hurry up. No, seriously, yeah, I have significantly more than we can discuss. And I would like to clarify some points and also to build a bridge maybe to the professors from Jena who are going to follow me from next week on. I prepared for the start today. I promised you that we do more hands-on things, and we will do that. We will talk more about conflict transformation than peace philosophy. And still, the first slide will be quite a challenging one. And I think and hope and expect that it is a very important one, because this expresses, or it is an attempt to show you how I reflect on the term reconciliation and my idea of how reconciliation studies and peace studies could come together, and what the main problems might be and how a structure could look like. And this has to do with all the things that we have discussed until here, and still I'm not sure whether you will find that this is just a conclusion. So whenever you get lost, please scream, or well, scream electronically, meaning send me your hand, that I stop, because I think this is really now an interesting point that has to be discussed and clear. And I'm sure that those of you who were happy with my approaches to language and grammar will also be happy now. So let's just do that. A very simple question. What does peace studies and what does conflict transformation have to do with reconciliation studies? And what do we have to regard after all the things that we have discussed until here? So what I think is that we will, first of all, when we talk from a peace studies point of view about reconciliation, we have to make clear whether we talk about transcendent reconciliation. So you remember the transcendent worldview. The world is created by a creator God, by a demiurge, as they say. Usually the concept of the monotheistic religions. And we have for the human affairs always a chain of question and answers that end with because it's the will of God, or because God wants us to do that. This is usually, if you are in a transcendent world, end of the story, because this cannot be challenged anymore. This is what we find, well, as we know, in all the Mosaic religions. This is what they share. And from that follows a complete structure of thought. It follows a complete deep culture that I would call Europe, or if you like it better, the extended Mediterranean. Now, after all that we discussed, we also know, well, that reconciliation per se is a word that is closely related to transcendent worldview, because in its etymological roots, it refers to exactly that, to this will of God who wants us to be calm together, as we said, one option of understanding it, or of coming together and being friends, discuss our issues peacefully or non-violently together. That's one option. The other option that we have is immanent reconciliation, which would be disembedding and re-embedding reconciliation in a completely different worldview, which is this all-one approach. The whole universe is one divine existence. Everything happens not guided by God, but within God. And therefore, everything that happens is per se, all existence is divine. Now, what follows from that? When it comes to a roadmap of reconciliation, how does reconciliation, which steps, how does reconciliation work when it comes to these two interpretations, and what is the possible difference? Now, we discussed, you remember the diagram of justice that we have discussed extensively, that if it comes to which means again, conciliation, we refer to something that has happened in the past. For those of you who speak German, I do a German play with German words here. For the English speakers, you see on the lower line the English translation. And of course, the relevant one here is the English version. So we talk, if it comes to reconciliation, about an issue that has happened in the past. We talk now, we refer to something that has happened in the past. And this is the same in both versions. It's always about something that has happened in the past. Therefore, we need the and we con because of the so we refer to something that has happened in the past. Now the difference begins. In a transcendent reconciliation, what we need as a virtue for this endeavor is vergeben in German, or forgiven, as it is forgiven as the English word. So this seems to be clear. So without forgiveness, reconciliation will be difficult. But in the immanent world, it's not about forgiving, or German vergeben, but it's about verzeihen, so it is verziehen, or excused. Are we clear? Question from my side to you. Are we clear about the difference between forgiven and excused? Is this clear to everybody? That's very important, because now from here the things get different. I see a yes from Ravan and no other signal, so that means it is clear. Okay.
Yeah.
So if yes.
Are you asking us or only?
No, I'm asking you, definitely, yes.
Yeah, there is big difference between excuse and forgiven. Forgiven means to transcend our bad or negative sentiments towards others, and excuse gives them maybe chance to pardon them. It's about sentiment. Forgiven, there is sentiment, but excuse, it's more about rational.
Yes, sort of. We are close here. We have almost an agreement. Yes, to excuse, which means literally to make no cause. Yeah, so that's what it means in the Latin origin. To make no cause, to do no charge, which means this is something that you can do in this human sphere. Ethically, you would deserve a compensation or whatever, a retaliation, but you don't do it. You don't make a cause. That's all in the human disposition. That's what excuse means. Whereas forgive, or in Latin, perdonare, that's the same meaning, means that we do or somebody, a doer, does the thing away, does not regard it. And the difference here is it seems to be the same. And of course, in everyday language, we don't think and use them as synonymous, but they are not, because in a philosophical sense, the only one who can forgive an misdoing, an error, or in a more, for making it clear, an error in the human sphere is here a sin. So who can forgive a sin? In a
So now it's a spiritual sphere now. If we are talking about the sin and the religious motives.
Exactly. So that means in the transcendent sense of the word, reconciliation, if it comes to this question of making, well, dealing with something bad that has been done, the one who can forgive is God. So the forgiver is God. This word is reserved to God. Whereas in the immanent world, we do not think or have such a God, and therefore this remains in the human sphere, where we can decide on our own expenses whether we make a cause or not. So do we accuse in English, or do we excuse? When I accuse you, I take legal measures in order to get my rights. When I excuse you, I don't do it. It's my decision. So I, as a human being, can, in this terminology, I can excuse, but in the very sense of the word, I cannot forgive, because only God can forgive. Yeah, and I know that we confuse that in everyday language and in most of them. So for example, if you ask somebody also in German about vergeben und verzeihen, many people will tell you it's the same. But if you look closely to etymology and to the history of the words where they come from originally, ziehen means to accuse, to make a charge. And excuse means make no charge, so that's human, whereas this forgiving of sins, that's a divine activity and exclusive to God. So that's the difference. And this, therefore, it is quite clear. Reconciliation, as we said, comes from a transcendent worldview. We find a lot about reconciliation in the holy books of the monotheistic religions. They are full of this reconciliation idea, and this reconciliation has a lot to do with the justice of God. And we discussed already, well, what different forms of justice we may have. Now, in the immanent understanding, it's not God's business to forgive, but it's the humans, the affected humans' business to excuse. That's the difference. And this has consequences. Next step in the transcendent reconciliation would be vergessen, or to forget, and the bad experience, the discrimination is forgotten. We have that also in everyday language. For example, if I tell you about somebody, he's a guy who cannot forget, what do I tell you? How do you understand such a message? You will understand, well, he's a person who never forgives. He remembers whatever has happened to him, whatever bad experience, he never forgets, and he comes back with that over and again. These are these people who tell you 30 years later that you have done something to them when you were still children or whatever. And now the philosophical question is, can you, in the process of reconciliation, decide at your will that you forget? Does this work? Is this a human disposition? Is it in your own hands whether you forget or not? So for example, if I tell you, what could I do? Yeah, I mean, just a very up-to-date example. You know that the Austrian Prime Minister until recently was Sebastian Kurz. Maybe, I guess that most of you have heard the name. He made quite a noise. So, and he resigned from all political offices yesterday. So if I tell you now, please forget Sebastian Kurz, can you do that? No. What happens if I tell you, well, the next exercise that we are doing together is please forget all the elephants that exist in the world. Forget elephants. What happens? I guess that everybody in this moment is thinking of elephants. So, but I told you, please don't think of elephants. I told you the opposite. So is it that you are bad students when you don't follow my advices? In this case, I guess not, because this is a normal human reaction. We have a notion that for elephants, and if I call for this notion, you automatically think of it. And it's not in your own hands. You cannot make a decision that you forget. Yeah, and we can play that with whatever you want. If I tell you, forget your parents, I guess it will not work. If I tell you, forget your partner, it will not work. So we can go with all these physical notions, but the same is when I tell you, well, something that has happened 10 years ago, I don't know, something good, something bad. So forget, for example, your wedding. Does this work? I guess not, yeah, so it will not work. Your wedding is not a person, and still you will remember your wedding exactly in the moment when I tell you forget it. Will you forget some experience of having been beaten? If I tell you forget the beating, probably the opposite will happen. You will recall it immediately. So where do I want to go? I want to go to the fact that forgetting is a human potential. We forget a lot of things, but what we forget, we cannot decide at will. The forgetting happens. Things that seem to be irrelevant just disappear from our awareness. So in a transcendent language, I can say whether you forget or not is in the hands of God again. So the same God who forgives sins is the God who decides whether the victim or the affected person, the discriminated person, forgets. Yes, are you with me? So it is all what the activity, the whole career of the process is in the hands of God. Whereas now we go to the immanent, and we have at the same place, the thing is understood, verstanden. And here comes a very interesting philosophical observation of the famous French postmodern philosopher Jacques Derrida, who said, referring to the second word that we have here, that excuse is only relevant in cases that cannot be excused. I'm very sorry. I know that's now that sounds strange and weird, but I invite you to follow me. What he says is things that can, in the immanent world, can easily be excused are not really relevant. So if I step on your toes and I say, excuse me, and you don't care because it didn't really hurt, it was just impolite, it was careless, but in the next moment it is gone. So, and you say yes, or it's okay, nothing happened, whatever, then this is not really an act of excuse. Excusing is relevant when I do something severe that affects you so strongly that you really suffer, that you really feel the pain, that there is really a loss. So we're talking about the serious things. And these things, for example, I killed somebody, a beloved person. If I do that, it's not, you will not just excuse. Yeah, this is too important, too serious, it causes too much pain. Or all the serious crimes that we know, I don't have to go into details. Now, what here becomes the virtue is that you try to step into the shoes of the perpetrator, or at least the person whom you perceive as a perpetrator, and you try to understand why this person acted the way he or she did. And that is super difficult because you are suffering, you have the loss, you are the victim. Now you should understand the perpetrator. And Derrida says, if you are able to do it, once you arrive in this process at the point where you say, okay, I suffer, but since I tried it, I understand why the perpetrator acted the way he or she or they acted. And I can imagine that in the same place, I would do the same. In this moment, excuse is not a category anymore. So you excuse something that cannot be excused because you understand. Understanding overrules, so to say, excusing. You get it? Yeah, I see a hand. Just let me finish this point until here.
I want you to repeat it because I lost you at some point. Is that okay?
Okay. Okay, yeah, fine, yeah. So I'm referring to Jacques Derrida again, yeah, the French philosopher. And he says, this paradox, which he starts from, is you can only, excusing is only relevant for things that cannot be excused. Because the ones that you can excuse easily are minor things that are not really relevant. So when you just easily say, okay, excused, done. But the serious things that require excuse cannot be excused because they are so serious. So I don't know, let's presume something really, really very serious. So somebody kills a person that is very close to you. I don't know whether you are a mother, but imagine somebody kills your son or your daughter, yeah, or your parents, whatever you want. Parents has everybody, so it's easier to talk about parents. So yeah, so somebody kills your mother or your father. This cannot be excused, right? That's too serious, that's too much. So excuse as such, as category 2 here in this diagram, does not apply for that, and precisely therefore excuse is needed. That's the paradox. And now the way out of the paradox, according to Derrida, is that you try, in order to get out of the eternally turning wheel of justice. Do you remember what we said? Yeah. So now this person killed your father, therefore you need justice. You call for justice. It's not fair that he did that to your father. You call for justice. Justice is revenge, is envy and greed. And if you succeed, the other person or the people of the other person will again ask for justice. And this is what we did for thousands of years, turning around in the name of justice. So therefore, excusing does not apply here in these serious cases. And the way out of this eternal wheel of unhappiness and doing harm to each other is understanding, according to Derrida. So since all of us are human and all of us are born with the potential to do the most beautiful and the most horrible things, we are able to put ourselves into the shoes of somebody else. And it's necessary, according to Derrida, exactly in the case when somebody did something horrible to us. So it's not that a big achievement if you put yourself into the shoes of a romantic movie, the hero of a romantic movie, yeah, to feel the love that the main actor feels there. Yeah, okay, that's an exercise, but it's not a big deal. But in this case here, we talk about the serious things. That's our job here in peace studies. We have to do the dirty work, yeah? So we try to imagine ourselves, to put ourselves into the shoes of the perpetrator or the group of perpetrators. And we try to understand why they did what they did. And if we do that successfully, excuse is not any criteria anymore. This is where this paradox comes from, because by understanding, you already dissolve you escape from the turning wheel and you get to the next stage that we have not discussed yet. That is not on the screen yet. But I want to make sure, Avan, that you follow me. So is this until here now clear? Yes, great. Okay, and I hope for everybody else too. And now we come to the final point, which is again very interesting. Okay, so which is now in German überwinden, or grammatically, since we refer to the past, a thing is in the transcendent reconciliation überwunden. In English, overcome. You know the famous song, and it's typical that this is a clerical song. We shall overcome. So what shall we overcome? We overcome the suffering that has been caused in the past, affects us in the present, and we promise that in the future we will overcome. Again, remember please the diagram of justice. So, and what is then in this setting the result of the process of reconciliation? It is that we overcome the problem, the conflict, the suffering, right? So what we get here is, because of this vectoral chronosophy, an end of the story. So we reach an end of the story. We can imagine at the end of the story, we reach sort of paradise. Either it's the transcendent paradise in the beyond, or it is paradise on earth. Both models exist, yeah? So, but it is at the end of the story, we have an ideal situation, we are fine. That's the promise here, to overcome. That means now, if you look at the whole career, the whole transcourse of the story, something that has happened in the past is forgiven, forgotten, overcome, gone. Yeah. So, and I use here the German version because there is a famous German traditional song that titles Vergangen, Vergeben, Vergessen, Vorbei. So for the German speakers, Freddie Quinn sang it. I think it was one of the #1 hits somewhere in the 50s or the 60s. Yeah, Sinat, you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, for the process has 4 steps, but not necessarily in the reality to apply the 4 steps to reach. For example, if we go for the political reconciliation, we don't forget, but we overcome. Sometimes in moral reconciliation, we forgive, but we have pain. So sometimes it comes from gun to overcome directly, without passing, I mean, to the 2nd and 3rd step.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I guess you invite me to complete the diagram, and then maybe we discuss the same thing again. Then you come in give me this chance, and then you come back and we see what you think about this one. Now let's finish also the career of immanent reconciliation. There's one element missing, and this is with this one that says in German, instead of überwunden, verwunden, and in English it translates as twisted. This is a word that I took now from the German philosopher Martin Heidegger, or you could also, more recent, is the Italian philosopher, postmodern philosopher Gianni Vattimo. They use these words, and it translates correctly into English as twisting. So the game of words does not play that well in English, but in German you can see it's nice. Yeah, it's aesthetic. Now, what is the difference between überwinden and verwinden, or between overcome and twist? Vattimo says here, we have to imagine verwinden as the process that happens if you just lose a beloved person. So not necessarily because of a crime, but like, I don't know, your parents get old and they die, was the case with me. So if I talk about my father, I know that he died 20 years ago. And I know that this was very painful for me because I loved him and then suddenly he was not there anymore. Now, what does this do? Can I overcome that? And Vattimo says, no, you can never overcome the loss of a beloved person because you will always remember this person. That means, and you will also remember how painful it was, but to twist this loss and the pain of the loss that the loss caused, well, can twist it in a sense that it does not hamper you in doing your daily business later. So that means that I remember my father. I remember the pain that I felt when I had to organize his funeral. That's all there, and still I can give my lecture today. And even if I mention that, I somehow react. My physical system and my neuroscientific, my neurosystem, my neurosomatic system reacts, but I'm still functional. So that means I twisted this experience and the loss, and I can continue living. And this is, I think, a good metaphor for the use is to thinking of somebody beloved. But now what happens if instead of a beloved person that I lost, if I think to something unjust, maybe even brutal, violent, that happened to me in the past? And here Vattimo says, it is the same story. So that means, yes, you have to acknowledge that this has happened, but you can still act, you are functional in the presence, and you can even communicate with the ones who were identified as perpetrators earlier in a constructive way. And of course, these are big words. We are clear that this is challenging for the human nature to do that, right? Okay, so I see only Sinat, but I hope that is also fine for the others. So that's a very important difference, because you see here on the green side of the diagram, we have no forgetting. So whatever unfair, uncomfortable has happened can belong to the past. It is twisted, but it's neither forgotten nor forgiven, because forgiving is in the hands of God, and whether I forget or not is again in the hands of God. But we are in the green line here. We are in the human sphere strictly. This is all things that I can do. And the main challenge and the main effort here lies, of course, in the third chapter, when I have to understand what I do not really like to understand because I feel that I suffered a disadvantage from the other. So why should I understand? But this is the crucial point. To either, we can say in the third step here, we either lay our fate into the hands of God and do our responsibility away, or we go the wild side, the uncomfortable side, and try to understand the other. And this, of course, is the main goal of reconciliation in this green sense here. So what is the result? When we now come to peace studies and to the interpretation from a peace studies side, the result will be in the first case, transcendent reconciliation equals, in our terminology, conflict resolution. So you remember conflict resolution says, or again, etymologically, that there is an end, a final point, an end of the story. The end of the story is conflict resolved. That's what we expect. And we are, in current politics and generally in conflict work, so frustrated because we over and again learned that conflicts tend not to be over. Yeah, so they come, when we think it's resolved, they come back in a different guise over and again. And this refers then to negative peace in the sense that I defined and that I presented to you in the first lecture, referring to Johann Galtung. So negative peace, not, well, pretending to be a singular tantum, pretending to be an essence, but in reality, if we look at the construct, it is an absence. It is an absence that pretends to be an essence, right? Okay, Rahan, shall I finish the slide or do you want to come in immediately? Yeah, I finish. It's just that the last line. So we have also to see the result now on the green side, on the immanent, which is the result here is conflict transformation. And this is the main goal of peace work, is now conflict transformation, more concretely elicitive conflict transformation. This is what we are going to discuss now after this slide. And the main point here is this understanding, this element of understanding. And then I know that the conflict, since it is not overcome, but twisted, is never over. Yeah, so the conflictive energy, since in an immanent world, energy cannot leave, it's always there. The question is, what kind of homeostatic dynamics do we get? Do we get a storm or do we get a soft movement of the dance of life? And here we can apply and can refer to positive pieces. Now, meaning peace is not an absence of an imagined opposite. Peace is not the absence of war and violence, but peace is something concrete. And this has to be understood and again twisted. This peace is never stable, but is object of the homeostatic flow of our relations, of the situations, of the conditions that we are experiencing every day. Okay, now I see a lot of hands. I don't know who was first. How can I find that out, or shall we just start with the way I see it? I see Ravan as the first one.
Thank you. Yeah, it was in order. So it was me, Zanat, and then Abdul Ghani.
Yeah, it is automatically in order, Professor.
Yeah.
Automatically. Okay, so then it's Ravan the first. Okay.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask about if you see excuse. So excused is same as pardon, or is it different? Because like literal translation is a little bit different, and then pardon is in Arabic also has a different connotation rather than English.
Yes. Yeah. No. So my answer is no. It's not the same. Pardon, or the French pardon, comes from Latin perdonare and means to forgive. So pardon would be placed in the blue part of our slide here. Yeah. So pardon and forgive me is in English the same. But if you say that, and if you will speak very consciously and strictly, this is only for God. And we even have this saying, yeah, God forgive me. Yeah, so that means you speak with God because there is no human being that can forgive you. The human being can only excuse you, make no cause out of what happened. That's the difference. Very strictly, if we use it that way.
But like, for example, in Islam, there is something called al-afu 'inda al-maqdira, which means like pardon when you can do it. So then we're going to forgiveness. So it's not like limited to God, but if you can do it, then you can do it.
Okay, but you use the word that I, of course, don't know. What, can you repeat that?
Yeah, so it's like pardon when you can, as a way of, if you can forgive someone for something that he is for a wrongdoing, then you forgive it. So now it's not limited to God, but it's also given to us as human beings to forgive people. So in this way, it's not limited to God.
Okay, I get it. So of course I cannot tell you in Arabic what it. I don't speak, so I don't know the etymology. But is it possible that you would correctly translate with excuse?
No, it's pardon, not excuse. Like,
okay.
Unless anybody else thinks that al-afu can be excuse instead of pardon. Does anybody else who speaks Arabic in the room want to reflect on that one?
Rowan, do you mean يعذر and يعفو? Yeah. Yeah, it differs if it's in Arabic.
Okay, but does it really literally translate as forgiving?
Can I add something to Rowan, because this is my question?
Yeah, please. Yeah, well, I'm lost here because I don't speak Arabic, so I cannot help you with that.
Okay, just my question will be in order. I will wait for Zinat, but concerning the word which is said by Rowan, yafu or af, I think, as I remember, it means that you are removing the traces of the problem. There is no trace for the problem. Okay, it's as if it is not there. This is al-afu, because yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and if this is the case, then I would translate that with excuse, because what you just said is exactly the meaning of excuse. I, a human being, make no cause. I do not accuse you. Yeah, excuse me simply no accuse. It's a negation of accusing. So it's fine. There might be, and very often it's not relevant anyway. But if it's relevant, well, okay, I don't make a cause. This is not forgiving. This is excusing. But again, how you solve that within the Arabic language, I cannot tell you. I mean, it is an interesting point. So maybe you want to investigate it a little bit, yeah. And it is also possible, well, because I mean, we are now translating Arabic notions into English, and I guess you always lose meanings and maybe also etymological tracks when you translate. I mean, again, I can tell you in German we don't differ. When I step on somebody, I can say forgive me or excuse me, and it is the same. Nobody cares. But if you go into the etymological meaning, then you see that there is a deep philosophical difference. Yeah. And even, I mean, of course, then we have these everyday tricky things. Yeah, I do something to you and I say, God, forgive me. So in front of you, I ask God for pardon, which makes you feel comfortable, of course. Yeah, because you see, well, I'm sorry. which would be the next possibility to say that for the same meaning. Yeah. For the Arabic, maybe really, if you are interested, you are very much invited to find that out concretely, how your language has developed in this sense, and also how the translations have been brought. Okay, yeah, Roman, I fear further I cannot help you, but okay, good. Okay, thank you. Then Sinat.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about this diagram. So it comes to my mind two ideas. The first one is about the peace, and the second one is about the reconciliation, because this diagram steers towards to transform the relationship. If we can take the process from gun to overcome directly, it's about more peace building, peace. But if we go through the normal process, I can see it's more reconciliation, because reconciliation is a process of forgiveness characterized by truth-telling and other things. But peace building is about the relationships in more stable and peaceful conditions. So so it provokes two ideas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can completely follow you. I mean, and again, I told you from the beginning that what I'm doing here is I try to find overlapping notions, since we are doing this Erasmus Plus together, and in a way we are now two disciplines that have their understanding of what they are doing, and suddenly we find each other together in one pot, so to say. And we have to see how our choices mix and agree or disagree. And my conclusion is that we do pretty much the same. So that there's a lot of different words for the same activities and the same goals. And I know, as a peace researcher of 35 years, that there are different tendencies, factions of peace studies, and they depend again on the general background, on the cosmovision, on the worldview of the peace researchers. So we know, as I told you, when we made our journey through history of peace studies, for example, there is this strong tendency that comes from these traditional Christian peace churches that are minorities within Christianity. I know systems theory, of course, which is a more, well, here in this color game, it would be green, yeah. And of course, peace system theories bring you to a very different understanding of peace than the moral and the modern approaches. So these things, yeah. Then, well, since here most people are Muslims, we also know, I just am preparing an essay for a compilation with a colleague from Iraq, where she writes about all the different Muslim factions in Iraq and what that means for the society. I think everybody knows, I don't have to go into details here. And then among them, you have even Sufis. So are Sufis Muslims at all? If yes, what kind of Muslims? Maybe the most strict and secret Muslims, or they are an already external heretic sect, whatever. You have all interpretations, depending on what kind of Sufis, because Sufis are not Sufis everywhere the same. So even there you have differences. And these, then of course, you can even within Islam, depending on the schools and tendencies and places, you will discuss peace in very different ways. The same goes for all the other worldviews that we mentioned. And I think that with reconciliation, sort of similar things happen. And this is what you see here on the screen is a proposal that I developed now because I want to get along with that in this process of merging peace and reconciliation studies. And I think it's the right moment to do so, because next week you can challenge, I think it's Professor Leiner's turn, so challenging with that and say, what do you think about that? So what is the reconciliation studies perspective on peace studies? How do you perceive that? I mean, if you want to give him a hard time, challenge him with that. Yeah, I would welcome that very much. If you don't do it, I will do it in another context.
Yeah, another idea also about the degree of the peace or the reconciliation, because if it's from gun to overcome, it's a contra, political contra, or another kind of contra. Maybe this contra is not strong enough. Maybe the peace is shallow. Maybe the peace is deep. And the same for the reconciliation. So this illustrates many ideas, and I can see many concepts behind this diagram. It's excellent one. We can use in many different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Well, it's good if you think that you can work with that. I see that Dr. Yat is getting nervous, but still. Abdelghani would be before. Is this okay, Yat? Can he speak first?
Yes, Professor, no problem.
Okay, good. Okay, I cannot see you, but I feel your nerves, the pulsation of your nerves. Okay, then Abdelghani is the next one, please.
Thank you, Dr. Riyad, for letting me asking my question. Thank you, Dr. Professor Dietrich. The problem, my question is related to Rawan's question, okay? But first, I'd like to say that yes, we have many confusing words in Arabic. That's why we are confused when we try to understand the meaning. Like فَاصْفَحِ الصَّفْحَ الْجَمِيلِ in Quran, it's also talking about forgiving. Okay, so we have many words which we take as forgive in English. That's why I'm asking about, and as you said, by the way, when you said, when I ask God, my proposal is nearly in comparative religion. So I'm talking about religion a lot. When you say, when I ask God, forgive me, I can't say, God, excuse me, because as you said here, excusing needs understanding. And God, of course, understands everything without showing him. I don't have to tell God the reason. Okay, so excusing needs understanding, as I understood from here. Okay, so I don't say, God, excuse me. And when I asked you last time about the difference between excuse and forgiving, you said that forgiving is religious, as you repeated today. Forgiving is religious; it's exclusively to God, and excusing is a human process or a human deed. Okay, if I try to, that's my question, and it's related to Rawan. If God asked me to, or asks, or just provokes forgiving, and asks me or his followers, his servants, to forgive others for some certain problems or whatever. Is this a kind of forgiving because it's God's orders, or it is a kind of excusing because it's a human action? I forgive them or I excuse them in order to follow God's orders. You understand my question? Is it a kind of forgiving or a kind of excusing? Thank you.
Okay, I can only give you a philosophical answer here. I'm not sure whether this is theologically correct, but I would say, why should God ask you to forgive? I mean, grammatically, you can ask that, or you can say that. But I think philosophically, it doesn't make too much sense, because God is the forgiver. And why should he ask a human being for do it in his place? So I would say the forgiving is in the hands of God anyway. He can, because he forgives, he can make you excusing. in the human sphere. But the powerful, the divine act of forgiving is always in the hands of God. And you are just his instrument, his tool. Yeah. So the greater forgiveness, so to say, the higher forgiveness is divine and is not human in this transcendence.
Yeah, so it will be if I forgive someone sticking to the God's orders, just to follow his orders, it's a kind of excusing also, not forgiving.
Exactly. So the result, what is in your hands is an excuse.
Yeah.
More you cannot do because you are human.
Yeah. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Professor.
Okay.
Dr. Iyad, can I just make my question because it's a follow-up before your question? Thank you. So like for us, or at least like in Islam, like out of justice, God won't forgive. For example, if I hurt somebody else, God won't forgive me even if I ask forgiveness until that somebody forgives me first. And that's out of justice for us. So it is given to the human beings first to give forgiveness, and then God will forgive you. So it's a two-layer out of giving them the right, because this is your right and was taken from you. So I'm giving you the right to decide whether you want to take it back or not, and then I will give the forgiveness. So that's a little bit different than other religions, I guess.
Again, it's I could only guess, so it doesn't make too much sense that I comment on that. I can believe you simply, but my proposal here would be to use a different vocabulary in English without changing the meaning. So what if God only forgives if the affected person excuses? Or in how I would hear it and understand it, that in the act of excuse, of the human excusing, I see that God forgives. But I have a hard time imagining a God who gives the disposition into the hands of the human. That God says, okay, I forgive if you do it, and if not, well, I'm out of the game. This is maybe it's really difficult because I'm here arguing in a vacuum. Yeah, but from a Christian point of view, I cannot imagine such a God. God is almighty, so why should God give this power and make himself dependent on the acts of humans?
But maybe just added in the chat box that this is the same concept in Judaism. So I think it's only in Christianity that is different. Is that like a safe suggestion in the three like holistic religions?
In Islam, we can say forgive. In our translation is forgive, samah. We ask for musamaha from other party. It's not only in the spiritual or religious sphere. It's only in human beings sphere also. We use samah, forgive, in daily relationships.
Yeah, so I think we have here probably a translation problem, and I cannot really help you with that since I don't speak Arabic. Yeah, but I think philosophically we are clear. I think these concepts, at least they may help you and serve you as a trigger for considerations on the transcendent. This is the important point here, and the immanent versions of reconciliation. That is what I wanted to elaborate here. Well, maybe Iyad, you can help us because you speak both languages, and probably you have also worked with reconciliation long enough for knowing.
Thank you, Professor. I would like to have some comment about reconciliation process and peace process from my own perspective, because I took it from different philosophers like Nietzsche, who speaks about the power relation and the ultra dynamic powers. So, and then you go to Habermas, who talks about the communication action theory. And then you go to about Pierre Perdue, who talks about the communication theory. So it's all about kind of communication that you develop, and it's about the action theory. So action, transaction. So the first theory that they came up with, as I remember from Ledrich, is what they called in transaction theory. So whether reconciliation or process or forgiveness, what is the action? So if the action is peace, and peace is the action, so it might be the process is reconciliation. But if the reconciliation is the action, so the outcome will be peace process. So they are interdynamic with each other, and they transcend and they transform. And this is when we understand that I am doing reconciliation for peace, so I'm doing a peace process. But if I'm doing a peace process for reconciliation process, so the action is peace. And then in there, what I call actually is where comes peace building. So peace building is the action to develop transaction and then to develop a reconciliation. Now reconciliation and process, it depends on, now everyone's speaking about the language, but then they have the language that are defiers. So each, as Professor Ditcher said, there is many pieces. So you are making like the language as an obstacle, but it's not an obstacle because you'll have your own kind of piece. You cannot, there is no piece that you can follow. Like many people who do this problem, in my perspective, like thinking that South Africa apartheid is the same as the Israeli-Palestinian apartheid and comparing between each other, which is impossible. And people compare it, which is impossible. And this is kind of like, I want to do the peace of South Africa, of reconciliation of South Africa, but you are not being killed because you are your color, or you're not being killed because you are a Muslim. You're not being killed because it's a different type of conflict, for example. Like in Myanmar, they killed the Muslims. They killed them because they are Muslim and they ran to Bangladesh. So this is an ethnic problem as well, another conflict. And so it is all depends on the transaction that you are developing and the type of transaction that you are developing too. So and then you have to do what Professor Wolfgang says, many pieces, and understand. Okay, I have many pieces to the action. So many pieces is the transaction, and then many pieces can lead to reconciliation process in different ways. So this is what I wanted to ask to like comment to see where we are going. Maybe if you have any other comment, Professor, on what I said. So the one thing that I want to say, because I do apply for Nicias, so there is like a shift, and in the middle there is the power. You have reconciliation and process and peace process, and in the power is the ultra-dynamic, what we call the action the communication action theory for Habermas, and they are switching between each other all the time. So you cannot put any create your own obstacles when you see there's an obstacle for peace, meaning you're doing your peace and not anyone's peace. So that's not peace. In that time, we go back to negative peace, conflict resolution, and you're not doing conflict transformation. But if you want to go like twisted does not mean that it is not good. Twisted means that you accept the conflict transformation and understand the narrative of the other. As Professor said, put your shoes in the other. So the conflict transformation can happen if you can understand both aspects of peace and how they can work together within the conflict itself. And the idea is to develop conflict transformation. So this is what I wanted to say. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to look at time. Let's see what Vael wants to contribute.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to comment on this discourse on excuse and pardon and forgive. In my opinion, and I just think I can change it. I'm not sure about it, but I guess excuse is when someone is doing wrongdoing or something wrong to you unintentionally. So you excuse him because these things happen. But about pardon and forgive, pardon, in my opinion, always comes from upper authority, from up to down. When someone has the power to revenge, but he pardon you. And we usually use it even in legal terms. Pardon for prisoners, or presidents give a pardon to someone. So always it comes from upper authority, in my opinion. While forgive may become whether from up or down, but it has similar meaning. But pardon, maybe it has special meaning in my mind.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. That's very clear, and I agree totally with you. And just let me add, well, because I was focusing a lot on God with this when we say from up, so the highest authority in a moral understanding of peace is God. But if we secularize that, we can still have the same structure of thought. And this is what we see in the modern interpretations of peace, where the same thing that you just said also applies. It is the pardon could become from the president, from the king, from the high court or whatever. Yeah, and also the one who can forgive is in this case then a political authority. But it is the same, precisely what you said, it is coming from up, whereas the excuse is on the horizontal level. Exactly, yeah. So, and this transcended in itself says that it refers religiously to God, but in a secular way, the same structure is there, and we still have this up, this ultimate point of law, in this case, of constitution, that allows the authority to do so. Exactly that. Yes, that's precisely what I wanted to say. So thank you very much for this clarification. So I see no hands anymore, and we have a few minutes. I think we started very late. Shall we do one or two more slides? Yes. Okay.
Yes, we can. There is a actually here by Kim Burley, and she's asking, we have talked about the individual and the divine in this process of reconciliation. Can we talk a little about the rule of law or collective rule in this process?
Yes, so but I think this is just what I just did. That I say, yes, exactly that. I tried to make that understandable with the help of religion, but you can, since you remember we said the shift from moral to modern peace was secularization. So people who promoted that did not believe in God anymore, or at least not in this version of God that the so-called experts for the interpretation of God sold to them. This is principally a Christian, but not exclusively a Christian thing. Yeah. So that means people rebelled against the Pope, the bishops, the authority of the church. And then as a result, we get secularized nation states, since Thomas Hobbes, whom we discussed, and since the Westphalian peace treaties that we discussed. So since then, we have secularized states, but the structure is the same, because just the place that God had before in the moral is now taken by a version of reason. So the reason expressed, for example, by the constitution of the nation state. And the constitution always claims to be rational, right? I mean, you don't have nonsense constitutions. People think what they write into this very fundamental document for the foundation of a state, that's reasonable, right? And then all the laws derive from the constitution. So you cannot do anything in penal law or in civil law or in commercial law or whatsoever without reference to the constitution. And therefore the constitution takes the place of God. And the interpretation of the constitution becomes a job of well-skilled experts. We call them professors. So professors for law usually, but also political science and so on. These people interpret the constitution, and then they are even called to become members of high court and similar things. Yeah. So the idea of this authority, which is now a political authority, is very similar to the religious authority. And therefore, this is what has been said before, the act of forgiving or pardoning still is in the hands of an authority. When it was the God before, it's now the president, the king, the parliament, whoever. Yeah. So that's the essence, I think, of this whole debate. Yeah. If this is good enough, yeah, I still would like to do a few slides because we started late, and I know that this is then my last unit, and at least I want to mention some of the principles that are important for our school here. If this is okay, maybe we go 10 minutes more and then we make a short break. Okay? Yes, good. Good. So then, well, this gentleman has already been mentioned. This is a picture when he was still young, Jean-Paul Lederach. And now when we come to the application of all this very hardcore philosophy that we discussed, Lederach gives us a very hands-on and a very understandable concept how we do based on that all conflict transformation. And he calls that elicitive. And the ones who are very strong in English may know that the word elicitive does not exist. You cannot find it in the Oxford Dictionary. It is an artificial word that Lederach created, and he gives us in one sentence a definition what he means with that. He says elicitive conflict transformation draws out, highlights, and catalyzes existing or commonly held knowledge related to transforming conflict between individuals, groups, and communities, while prescriptive approaches propose pre-created models. So this is really, in a nutshell, the definition of a whole branch of peace and conflict studies that follows this line. And you can see the relation to what we discussed before, because now elicitive says that the transformative energy can be found in the relation of the conflicting parties only. So, and this makes it clear why peace has to be a plural, for example. So where can you go if the transformative energy is in the hands of the parties and not of a higher authority? Not even I myself as a conflict worker am the authority who can tell the parties, just be peaceful, just be nice. If you do this or that, you will be fine. We are not, in this understanding, not authorized to do so. Therefore, what we can do, what we are as conflict workers, is nothing but providers, facilitators, moderators of the conflict. We provide the frame for a safe encounter of the parties where they can together elicit alternative options of interaction. And that was, in the mid-90s of the last century, really a revolution of international peace work. This was created in the context of the Bosnia War and general of the Balkan Wars, but it was really a turn in the understanding of what we are doing. So we are not going into conflictive contexts for telling people how to peace, but we go there in order to provide frames so that they can find out how they want to interact. And maybe that they can also imagine in a relaxed context how they might interact in a different way in order to make life a little bit more comfortable. So that was a crucial change. And well, at least the school that I'm coming from is standing for that approach. That's what we advocate. So this definition, yeah, is really important. And you see then in brackets, while prescriptive approaches propose pre-created models, this was the mainstream until then. And in many international organizations, you will still find prescriptive conflict resolution or prescriptive conflict transformation. We hopefully will have time to discuss that a bit later. Okay, so let's have a talk show. This is a talk show now from the 90s. You see this extremely handsome young man here who is moderating and has two guests in the studio. One is this gentleman and the other one is this gentleman. I guess that you know all of them, right? Everybody can identify the guests and the host tonight or this afternoon in this time. And now our topic in the talk show is, what is the difference between prescriptive and elicitive conflict transformation? And the two gentlemen that our guest has here start to discuss. Now, prescriptive, what is the goal of prescriptive conflict resolution? The goal is, in this case, in this prescriptive approach, the transfer of wisdom, the transfer of knowledge that the conflict worker has and brings to the conflicting context. Whereas in the elicitive approach, the goal is discovery and creativity and creation. So that means, very important, the conflict worker in the first group or the first approach knows where to go, and in the second, the conflict worker does not know and does not need to know. Of course, the conflict worker needs a certain basic knowledge that he or she may get from the pre-deployment training, but not a goal. Yeah, so very different. Then what is the resource? In the first approach, the model and the knowledge of the trainer or of the conflict worker, if you like, yeah. And the resource for the second approach is the within-setting knowledge. As we said, the energy, and another word for energy is, of course, the knowledge. How it could be done differently can only be found in the context, in the relation of the parties. So therefore, if we do trainings, and this is now, I think some of you at least are professors, or some of you will be professors soon. So we are, in our profession, we are trainers of would-be peace workers. So what are we doing with them? If you follow the prescriptive approach, and this is now really, if it comes to curriculum development and so on. So it is content oriented. If we write curricula where we just list what has to be discussed in class, then we have a long list, a normative list of contents, and this has to be transferred in the classroom. Whereas in the second approach, training has to be process oriented. That is, the students bring their experiences, they bring their beliefs, they bring their pain that they carried for years into the classroom, into the training setting. And then the encounter of these concrete students creates, with the help of the professor, the best possible result, which means we have in the first approach a competitive study logic, and in the second a cooperative study logic. And of course it requires totally different skills, didactic skills, from the professors. And I can tell you from experience, of course, the second version is much more challenging and much more energy consuming for the professor. The next, what does empowerment mean? Empowerment means, in the prescriptive approach, learning new ways and strategies for facing conflicts. In other words, the students can come like these famous empty glasses. You may know that this phrase from Paulo Freire, So the human mind imagined as an empty glass, and education means we fill it with content. And after the training, the students' glass of mind is filled. This is a rather outdated understanding. And empowerment in the second, in the second approach means validating and building from the context. So again, even in the classroom, I have to know who are my students, what topics, what concerns, what sorrows, what pain do they bring into the class. And also, I just want to mention that from my recent experience in Iraq, of course, also what hopes and expectations do they bring into the class. I see that teaching in a country like Iraq currently means that you are confronted with a young generation that really wants, that is beautiful. That means that they are coming from a certain suffering that I don't have to describe more. And because of that, they come full of hope and they have a lot of expectations. So this is great, this is contextual, and it requires a certain way to deal with that, because if you just promise and fill the empty glasses, what you get in the end will be highly frustrated students, and you will turn the wheel of suffering, of injustice for another round. So who is then the trainer? In the prescriptive approach, the trainer is an expert, is the model. So if you have ever seen or heard Johann Galtung teaching or giving speeches, you can easily see, even if he doesn't say it explicitly, that he considers himself as that peace worker. He's the father of peace studies. Therefore, if you follow him, if you do what he did, then you will be successful. This is totally different if you meet Jean-Paul Lederach, because he will tell you that the trainer is nothing but a catalyst and a facilitator. This is what I told you already. So, and then relevant for us here in this class, since we are intercultural in this process, culture in the prescriptive approach is a technique. So I learn culture, I know culture, and I use it. So the question here would be, if we deal in this interconfessional setting that we have, well, I try to learn as much as possible about Islam in order to tell you in your language, in your worldview, how to do things. That is rather manipulative, colonial, if you want. Yeah. And the other one is culture as a foundation, as a seedbed. So we take it because it's real, it's there, it's manifold, and in each culture and each cultural setting, and systematically a culture can be a very small thing. This can be how people communicate in a village, in the countryside somewhere, and so on. That's also culture. And in all the cultures, we can find the seeds for change, the seeds for alternative ways of interaction if the current ones are uncomfortable or maybe painful. Yeah, so that's the result of our talk show. And from that follows that elicitive conflict transformation, now if we imagine who shall do it, who is the peace worker, and that's what we are doing in universities, we train future peace workers. So what is the ideal that we have in mind? Now the elicitive conflict transformation, we know, requires more subtle skills than the prescriptive. Prescriptive is normative, therefore, if you master the norms, you can go and do it. If you do the elicitive approach, then as a human being, you have to be prepared much better. And pre-deployment trainings are too late for that. You have to do that still in the basic foundation on universities. So for curricular development, this decision is crucial. The curricula will be different structurally and content-wise. Further, elicitive conflict transformation considers the mediator as an element of the conflict. I told you already last time that the conflicts have eyes. So as soon as you approach, as soon as you engage, you will be part of the conflict, which has to be imagined here as a dysfunctional system. And therefore, neutrality is impossible. What we can do is we can be all partisan. But that means that we accept to work in favor of everybody in the conflicting area, which is usually in international conflict work. That means we go into another country and we serve all the conflicting parties. And usually we will not feel too much sympathy for all of them, because some of them might even want to kill us. And still we go and serve them. So that's quite an avert approach, if you want to say to see it that way. And I've been asked very often by many stakeholders, so why should we do that? Well, one argument, if you look at the composition of international peace missions, is money, because you can make a lot of money, you can earn a lot of money if you go on such a mission. It's not a good argument alone, but of course has to be accepted. But others might be all kinds of ideals. So we want to help the poor children in the world. We want to stop mass rapes and violations of all kinds of human rights and so on. We want to do it because we believe in it. Wonderful. But then be all partisan and be aware that if you go into the system, you have also to serve the people whom you perceive as perpetrators. Otherwise, you take sides. And that's really very, very, very difficult. That's one of the most difficult things, if not the most difficult thing in international peace work. If it comes to the personal level, to the conduction of the individual peace work. So, and from that follows, and with that I would like to go to break. From that follows that the conflict worker, as Adam Curl called it, the would-be peace worker, has to be aware of his or her role in that context. How can you do that? Only by knowing yourself. Awareness requires that you experience yourself in a safe and relaxed environment, and studies is the best moment to do so. Yeah, so as long as you are on university, if the curriculum allows, if the context is given, if the professors are properly skilled, you can experience yourself, which means explore your own limitations and explore your potential and then act accordingly. I say that because from experience, especially if you teach on the bachelor and the master's level, most of the young people who come to the universities think that they know their limits, but then they find that they don't have a clue where their limits are. Because people are filled with belief sentences about themselves, and they go with concepts of never tested aspects and characteristics of themselves. Usually they restrict themselves more than necessary. My experience is that people are too humble. Yeah, of course we have some of these super narcissist examples also, but what I hear from most of the students, the majority tells me, you know, I cannot because. Yeah, so I am only a woman, therefore I cannot carry heavy loads. I am, I don't know, tiny and small, therefore I cannot run long distances. I come from the desert, therefore I cannot swim. I come from the north, therefore I cannot stand the heat, and so on. And if you then ask them, have you ever tested that? Where is the limit? How much you can stand and what not? They themselves discovered that most of these concepts have never been really tested, and they don't know where the limits are. And now the virtue of the peace worker is to know their own limits for real. Yeah, not stories about them, not imagination, no fantasies, but really know how much can I stand. So it's a question, very, very, very fashionable discussion now. It's a question of resilience and of sensitivity. And this should be the content of peace studies in a hands-on approach on universities. Okay, I think this is maybe something that you want to think through. Let's have a break. Iyad, how long shall we go?
As much as you want, Professor, no problem.
Well, I would say now it's again, of course, it's again late. So let's meet again at 4. Is this okay for everybody?
9 minutes for me is fine. For me, it's fine. 9 minutes is okay. So they're not saying 10. So we add 1 minute.
Like 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Okay,
So
yeah, okay.
Good. At the 4:01, I hope everyone will be back.
Okay, good. Okay.
Okay, excellent.
Okay, so it's 1601 in Austria. No idea what the time is in other places. Yat, are you there? Can we start?
Yes, I am there, Professor, and yeah,
Okay.
we can start.
1601 also in Vienna.
It is 4:01. Still, they have the 1 minute. It's not over yet.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. And yeah, I will try to go as far as possible. Probably I will not be able to finish. And yeah, we'll discuss that later. Let's see what we can do. And now this doesn't work. Yeah, well, I think we skip that and we go now. So now we go to what I told you, that we discuss a little bit more in detail, elicitive conflict transformation, and then elicitive conflict mapping as the additional aspect that we in Innsbruck developed for the international debate in peace studies. So elicitive conflict transformation is the applied method of transrational peace philosophy. So what we did until here, what we discussed until here, now becomes practical. And this practical approach is based on 3 principles: homeostasis, correspondence, resonance. And I will try to discuss that now within 1 hour, which is really challenging. Maybe we better do not finish than just run through, but let us see how far we get. So you remember, this is what we started already last time. I invited you to imagine the conflict. No, I did not do that with you. No, sorry. So then it's new. I invite you, if you think of a conflict, that you start with the surface. So if you see 2 people fighting physically, what do you see? You see 2 skin-covered egos, maybe using some tools, some weapons, and attacking each other. But you do not really see the conflict that you see just in the physical aspect, and even only the surface of the physical aspect of it. And now, for making that more illustrative, I invite you to imagine the conflict as a pyramid. This should be easy for this audience here. I use that everywhere, right? So people in Brazilian have a harder time to do what I invite you to do now. So imagine the conflict as a pyramid standing in the desert. Now, what we know is that if you approach a pyramid, you have the choice from which direction you do it. This we discussed already last time. And I also said this pyramid that we call conflict, or the conflict that we imagine as a pyramid, has eyes. So be very aware what decision you take, from which side you approach, because the pyramid will say, look, the southern girl is coming, the northern man is coming, the western, the eastern, and so on. So that means, in other words, you remember the general directions. This we really discussed already last time. So here comes my security man, here comes my justice woman, here comes my harmony group, here comes the truth representative. So this is the first one. And why a pyramid? Because I follow here this famous, I took the word pyramid from Lederach, whom I introduced to you before. And Lederach's pyramid that became very famous says that if we go into applied conflict work, we have to make a decision on which level we work as conflict workers. Do we want to work at the grassroots? This is where the most people are. This is where the people suffer the most and know the least. Do we want to work on the middle ranges? That is the level of the leaders, of regional leaders, of business, spiritual leaders, political leaders, and so on? Or do we want to approach directly the top leaders, like the government, the top spiritual leaders, the top business people, and so on? And this is not a question of taste, but this is a question of tactics. And tactics begins with knowing my own resources. Now, if you work, maybe in the UN, you could say we have almost unlimited resources, which is usually not true. But in an NGO or in a concrete project, you usually have very limited resources. And you must think twice before you say, well, I go to the grassroots because these are the people who need it the most. And this is what satisfies me the most to work there with the people who really need it, the people on the ground. Because since there are many, since they do not know much, but they need a lot, it's easy to burn out on this level. And then sooner or later, your resources are consumed and you yourself are tired, are exhausted, and still there are a lot of people who need help. So maybe it's better to work at the middle ranges, because this is where the people that your counterparts can do more for the people on the grassroots. Or it might be even the easiest to do it on the top leaders level. Now, what Lederach found and recommends is to do the job on the middle ranges, because these middle range leaders usually have good connections to the grassroots. They know what these people really need. And at the same time, they have access to the top leaders, and their voice is heard by the top leaders, who are not that accessible for external, especially non-governmental peace workers in the field. So that was one of the points, the reason for him to create this pyramid, and his recommendation for working with middle range leaders. So, and now, this one you know already, so I can make that fast. This is how we finished the last time. And now for getting to a structure, a tactical structure, imagine now this time that these matrix that you see here is not a boat floating on a lake, as we discussed it last time, but imagine that this is the basement of the pyramid of Lederach. Then you get, if this is the fundament, and then you imagine that towards you, that the pyramid is constructed, then you see that these keywords, harmony, security, truth, and justice, stand for the general direction. So that you can equal them with north, south, east, west. And then it looks like this one. Now we have, this is now the conflict. What do we know? We see this pyramid out of balance. And after what we just discussed, we can imagine, for example, there is a lot of emphasis on the security question, and they disregard the harmony, because you see on the right-hand angle, this is more or less, there's no pressure, there's no effect, whereas the other one is overweight on this one. And because of that, also the others, like justice and truth, get out of balance. So that means we imagine conflict as a dysfunctional system, which means as an out of balance status in the homeostatic flow of energy, of societal relational energy. And therefore, well, here are the general directions. This is what I've said before. And therefore, conflict transformation means to bring the pyramid, the societal pyramid, back to balance. That's our job. This is what we are doing in conflict transformation. So we have to contribute in an elicitive way as facilitators, as providers to the balance of the conflictive energy. So that, for example, an overemphasis and overfocus on one aspect like security gets balanced by attention of others that are disregarded in this moment. And this is, again, not that we tell the parties, for example, be harmonious, but it is that we provide the frame where they find out that they do not need to be afraid of each other constantly. So maybe the other ones are not only killers, but they are also people who have their concerns. Now, everything that we discussed before, put yourself into the shoes of the other, understand why the others did what they have done. Maybe this contributes to a balanced, more balanced homeostatic flow. Okay, so far so good. So that's the principle of homeostasis. That's the first of the three principles that we discuss. So then we have, yeah, that's this. Now we get to the difficult thing. If it comes to a resonance, well, who resonates? Well, of course, all human beings in their relations resonate with each other. So you cannot not resonate. But you can be unaware of resonance. And this is a no-go for peace workers. Peace workers have to know the human characteristics, the layers of personality, and they have to be able to explore the status of their own layers. So, and this begins again with the surface. Yeah, just taking it back. Imagine here this figure, this in the center. This is you. This is the conflict worker. So it begins with what I said before, the surface. So all of us have a body. And of course, the body is crucial for applied conflict work. So I need my body. My body has to be functional. My body has to be trained. Yes, I don't have to be a bodybuilder. I don't have to be a marathon runner, but I have to be fit. So in the potential, within the potential of my physical somatic potential, I have to be fit, which means also I have to be aware of it. I said before the break, my observation, if I tell our students at the beginning of a semester and in the third week of the, no, in the fourth week of the semester, we are going to do 8 hours night march in the high mountains, I hear a lot of people telling me I'm not able to do that. And then I ask, well, okay, when have you done it the last time? When have you tried it? Well, never, because I'm too weak for that. Okay, that means it's not tested. So let's test what you can do. And of course, in a meaningful and careful way, but let's test it. If people tell me I can swim, yes, I know you have never tried it or you have not been trained as a swimmer, but usually human bodies can swim. So we have to find it out and similar things. Yeah. So that means the body has to be prepared for the mission. In order prepared means that I know what is required and I am ready for that. What happens if I'm not able to do it? If I know really that I'm not able to do it, well, then I don't go because I will just be a burden for the people on the spot. And I go as a peace worker in order to support people. So that means physical body has to be trained and you have to be aware of how much this body can do. We call that, if it comes to the conflict with Lederach, the episode. So the episode of the conflict is the surface of the physical aspects. And this includes myself. As soon as I go on a mission, I am in the context of the conflict. That means I'm part of it. And my body becomes the visible aspect of my presence there. So then the next one is now we have to explore our own functionality in a very interesting sense, according to the principle inside equals outside. That wants to say that there are aspects of each human personality that are internally and externally related and that make the person, the performance of the person, what it is. And all of these things are not necessarily rational. They are human, but they are not rational, but they are decisive for the success of our relations. And let's start now with this touchy topic, the sexual familial, meaning sexuality is not the body. Well, of course, we can do the sexual act with the help of our bodies, but sexuality as a human property is not on the skin, but it is under the skin. The sexual drive is an internal property of the human existence. And this is inseparably related to the family, which is the external, immediately surrounding reality. Meaning psychologically, that all of us are born into families, even if the family is not the one that we biologically stem from. If we grow up with somebody else, it is still the family, the group of people who is around us and who forges us in the first years of our life. Because the family gives us, by explicit teachings, but also by implicit behavior, the idea what normal is, what good is, what bad is, what the to-dos are, what the don't-dos are. So this is what we learn from the early childhood in the family. And among others, this also refers to sexuality. The sexual performance of your family of origin will influence clearly your own performance later as an adult person. Why? Because this is where you learn what normal is, what expected is, what welcome is, and how you belong and how you exclude yourself from the family, which kind of behavior is not accepted. That's what you learn. And then your needs, your sexual needs will be developed according to these norms. So that's how this becomes part of your person. And sexual here, please don't take the word too verbatim. I do not refer to the physical sexual act, yes, also, but this is not the point here. The point is that all our creativity is part of our sexual character. So we want to create, I mean, sexuality per se is creation, is an act of creation biologically, but it goes much further. If we like, if we feel joy when we draw, when we sing, when we write, when we interact with people, and so all is sexuality. So that's a very broad thing. And of course, the way how we design creatively our interactions, our relations, is also sexual. Therefore, people have sex appeal or don't have. Yeah, sex appeal does not mean that everybody wants to have intercourse with them, but the sex appeal means you like to be around them, you feel attracted. Yeah, and of course we all want to attract others because we are group animals. We want to interact with people. So all of that belongs here. And of course, this is true for every human being. And most people are not too familiar with their own aspects in this regard. But as a peace worker, you have to be clear with that. You have to be aware of your functionality, because you will interfere into the lives of other people. So unaware conflict workers are a burden on the shoulders of people in troubles. This is not what we need. What we need is functional conflict workers who can serve the people in troubles. Therefore, they have to be self-aware. They have to know themselves, their own functionality. So if you have serious troubles in this layer, you better try to twist them. Remember what we discussed before the break. So you try to twist them before you impose yourself on others. Is this okay so far? I don't see any protests, so I continue. Then the next layer is, well, I'm sorry, you cannot see that very well. I don't know how it is on your screens. It means the emotional communal. That's what it says, if you can read it well. So emotional means is again the inside aspect of the same layer, and communal is the outside. What does it mean? It means all of us, this is a human basic need, is do belong. We want to belong, and it is not enough to belong to a family. Even if you have a wonderful family, you still need to belong to a bigger entity, and this entity is a community. I define community as those people whom you really personally know. So that means neighborhood, quarters of your city, villages, however, compounds, however you call it. So the people that are more than family, but you know them personally. And what you need is, what you ask them for, is that in this community, you can find your place and act accordingly. You can identify with the one that you seek to be. They give you the place, they allow you to be who you are. And if not, you will be hurt. So sentences like, this is not for girls, for example, are discrimination that hurt and will affect the development of the little girl and later the grown woman. Or the same, of course, with boys. Or if we take aspects of racism, of religious groups, of social groups, and so on, all of that plays a role here. So the question is for ourselves, do we belong properly? I give you the personal example. I think I outed myself already as a refugee's child who grew up in a small village. And of course, my whole life, the question was, do I belong or not? So is the refugee, the migrant, is it the alien, not accepted in the community, or does the community give this or offer this alleged alien a proper place where he can unfold? Yeah. So, and I think many of you will have will feel empathy with that, because it happens around the world everywhere. So this is a main concern. This is a main need. And if our feelings in this regard of this basic need are hurt, they turn into emotions. So what is an emotion? An emotion is a feeling that belongs to the past, is a feeling that we felt in a certain moment of life. Very often it is either negative or extremely positive. And because it is so intense and so important, we are not able to let it go. Again, remember what we had on the screen before the break, yeah? The difference between forget, not forgetting, or twisting. So can we twist our emotional experience and let it go, or do we attach on it? And human beings tend to attach. So if we attach to feelings, positive or negative, that belong to the past, we are not focused in the present. Because, for example, since a very simple example, I see in front of me the picture of Sinat. So if, for example, your nose reminds me of somebody who did something to me 50 years ago, my emotional body will react, will be in a way blocked because it's attached to this person long time ago, and I will not react and interact with you properly because this memory stands between the real you and me. Yeah, so and this is not bad, this is human. Yeah, so this is not a mistake. The point is that we are able to deal with that we are aware of that, and specifically in the professional action, we are able to handle it. Meaning, I am able in action as a conflict worker to recall that I am here, that I am now, and the person in front of me is the person who is really there, and this person is not my grandmother who did something to me a long time ago. Yeah, so that's the important thing. There's the awareness of the own condition and the ability to be fully focused in the current relation with the party. That's the virtue of the conflict worker, and if you are not able to that, you cannot do your job. Therefore, again, same story, we have to address these aspects in the studies. When we develop our curricula, we need professors who are didactically able to do this and call and give the students exercises to train that. So the next one is the mental societal, which is very similar. The mental is the internal, the societal is the external, and it becomes bigger and deeper simultaneously. Mental now means, of course, what is coming from the Latin word mens, so the thinking. And here we have to deal with the fact that we as human beings are very privileged because we are all equipped with a super intelligent mind. That's great, because this mind helps us who are quite imperfect, physically imperfect beings compared to many animals, but the mind equips us with the ability to master the life on this world, because we remember very well, we analyze very well. So with the help of the mind, we really can get along and we can balance a lot of weaknesses that we have physically. And well, also with our senses, yeah, I think we discussed already. We don't see very well, we don't hear very much, we don't smell very well. So all these things, but with the help of the mind, we can balance that. This is the good news. The bad news is that this mind is so active and is that great that it can constantly produce wonderful movies. And emotionally, we easily fall in love with these movies. Meaning, because we experience things and we remember, our mind processes them over and over again and creates fantasies of all kinds, stereotypes. Fantasies, I said, stories in general, and we love these stories. This is also okay if you sit somewhere in the sun and you dream and imagine something that is somehow nourished by experience, wonderful. But in professional action, we have to be clear, what do we really perceive and what is nothing but a fantasy? And since we love our fantasy so much, we tend to attach and we tend to confuse reality and fantasy. So therefore, we need mental training in order to be focused and really on the spot while we are in action. And the same then, of course, is relevant on the external side. because as societies do not really exist. Communities exist. Communities are the groups of people whom we really meet. But a society is an imagined entity. So we need again the mind in order to construct the idea of a society. If I say I'm an Austrian, how can I give you evidence for that? Well, I can show you my passport. It's somewhere behind me there. So I can show you my passport, and then I can identify this being Austrian. Yeah. And well, I can, what else? I can give you my social security number or all kinds of IDs and so on. That makes me Austrian. But where is the reality Austria? Do I know all the Austrians? Of course not. We are 8 million. That's not very much, but it's too much for me. So I don't know all of them. And still, because of this ability to imagine, I get emotional when the Austrian national soccer team wins against Switzerland. And well, this is remarkable enough, because what I see is in TV, 11 red-dressed guys running around and well, scoring. But the real thrilling thing is that somebody on the other side of the country, I'm here in the very west, so the people in the east of my country do exactly the same, and we have never met. They have never, then don't have a clue that I exist, and I don't know about them. And still we do the same. Why? Because we imagine the nation, and we identify with some symbols, with the flag of the nation, with the emblems that we know. In our case, it's the eagle, with well, the anthem, with the, well, and the national soccer team, if you want, or maybe some other sports people who start for Austria, and therefore we want them. Yeah. So you see the point. In order to have a society, you need imagination. And that's super important, because before we discussed constitutions, so why should I believe and do what the constitution says? The only reason for doing so is that I identify that my mind tells me you are Austrian, therefore the frame of the laws for you is the constitution. It's not real, it's imagined. And we agree on this imagination, and therefore we create our order based on that. So, and then the next one is the spiritual policital. Since we don't have time, I will not go deeper into policital. It's not a typo, it's not political, it's policital, meaning that the precondition in the very extremes out there is that as a human being, I have to imagine all existence within time and space. Why? Because our nature does not allow us to do it differently. This is not the ultimate truth about existence, but this is the human condition that only allows me to imagine and configure things within this frame. And this is on the very internal, on the deepest inside of the person, the spiritual aspect. So all of us, all human beings are equipped with this potential. We can be spiritual. We can have spiritual experience. But now the problematic thing for this topic here is that this spirituality is bigger than the mind. I think most of you may know what I mean. If you pray, if you meditate, however you call that you experience things that cannot be expressed properly in words. Why? Because the spirituality is higher, is bigger than the human mind, and therefore the attempt to express these things in human words makes it smaller and is sort of a distortion. And still, spirituality, as we know, is very important for human relations, same as all of these things that we mentioned before, and it is difficult to talk about it. So what are we doing as a conflict worker? Well, I would say we start with asking for our own spirituality, being aware of it, and then trying to relate spiritually, which is beyond the level of the mind. And this is also a skill that the conflict worker has to bring. And to train these aspects is rather unconventional on universities, because universities are the churches of rationality. And if you tell people we go beyond these limits, very often professors tend to freak out. I can tell you a long story about that in my own university. And it is human, and therefore it is relevant for our topic and for our work. Yeah, and then this would go philosophically to the epicenter. I leave that away because we don't have enough time. So the main point here is what you see, that these layers in general are not rational themselves. Sexuality is not rational. Emotions are not rational. Mental imaginations are not rational. Spirituality is not rational. But we can talk rationally about them, and we can analyze them rationally. That's the important point here. So in the end, we imagine the conflict worker and the parties like this Russian Matrushka system. So within each of us is another one, is another one, is another one. All these aspects are, therefore we call them layers. And we also radiate externally in this sense. And now the art of conflict work is to communicate. This is what Eyad already mentioned before the break, that we communicate with our parties on all these layers. Therefore, conflict work goes far beyond these expressions of rational thoughts. Yes, this is important. Yes, it is great that we, the human beings, are able to do so, but the peace work goes far beyond. We have to know our positive peace, we have to know how it feels, and we have to know how we communicate peacefully with others. So the question in the end of year of peace studies is, who am I as a conflict worker? And if yes, how many? How many persons am I? And do I know them all well? So that's more or less what the training should do. If you take this drawing here as a diagram, you could say in the university study of peace studies, all these layers have to be addressed. And we need also in the format of the classes, not in only frontal lectures, but we need also a seminar workshop style training. Okay. Yeah, just as a footnote, maybe, this is not so unfamiliar to those of you who maybe have already studied the basic needs concept. You see, I took this from Wikipedia, this diagram. Interesting is here, if you look at the colors of these different fields, the physiological, as they say, as the safety, the love, esteem, and self-actualization, these are the words that they use here. And the colors are exactly the ones that come from the Indian chakra philosophy. And this is the same inspiration that I also took for our system here. And yeah, and important is that this very often in English, this is translated not as a pyramid, but as the hierarchy of needs. And the gentleman who proposed that many decades ago, Abraham Maslow, he explicitly said, please don't understand it as a hierarchy. It is not that in peace work, we start with the physical needs. So we feed people, we give them water, we give them sleep, we give them shelter, and so on. And only then we go to the next one, because this would mean in the context, in the human context and in the condition of the world, that we never stop, that we never continue, because we will always have to feed people. Yeah, we know since that time, since the 40s of the last century, constantly we had masses of people suffering hunger in this world. So our job as peace worker is not only feeding people, nourishing people. Nourishing, yes, but nourishing with all human aspects and all human needs, and not only with the physical needs. So we are not only a food agency. You can work for one, and it's okay to do it, but this is not peace work in its complete sense of the word. Yeah, so Maslow rather said we have to understand it according to the to this Indian system as turning wheels that are interrelated, like tied to each other, and each move has an influence on all the others. So not a hierarchy, but an interacting, interdependent dynamic system. And this is, I think, pretty understandable. I mean, we know from the practical field, for example, if you go into a refugee camp and you see that, well, they need food and you only bring food, you will not get very far. Of course, if not, they will die of hunger, and dead people don't have needs anymore. But before that, you will see that they long to be with their families. They need company. They need affection. They need spiritual breaks and experiences and assistance. They need the feeling of belonging and so on. So all of that is there. Even hungry people have more needs than food, and that's well, quite interesting that the international scene took a very long time for understanding that. Okay, here is Abraham Maslow, and well, he's one of our heroes and inspirations in peace studies. But before I just continue, maybe I ask you whether you want to ask or add or contribute something, because this, from my point of view, until here, this is really very important. And well, maybe also Ayat might help with the question, since we discussed curriculum development and so on, whether this momentum is regarded in the existing curricula or should be integrated into revised curricular forms. From my point of view, I tell you, having this in mind, when you create and run peace studies programs, this is the most important and at the same time the most challenging, because it is not in full accordance with the general attitudes of universities. Okay, so since I see hands, I think we will use the last quarter that we have. Luis is the first on the list, so as I understood it.
Yes, thank you, Professor Dietrich. Of course, this I'm agree for me. This perspective is a very important guide, the most important guide actually. And I'm working on the spatiality and ecology of peace and reconciliation. And for me, the question is, or my main critic, so to say, is how these notions of conflict resolution are assuming a human being that is not rooted spatially and ecologically. I mean, and this is nice, this graph that you have is a person that is in a place, in a region. You see maps, you see mountains, and it's interesting. And there are many discussions in the epistemologies of ecology and epistemologies of spatiality, of the space, of the social space. What is the relation between this person and this space, this social space? And this notion of social space is different, for example, to the notion that Lederer has For Lederach, a social space is a family, a community, a network of social interactions. But from the spatial turn theories, there are many theories. The people is connected with the space, with the nature, with the place, with the regions through different ways. There are, for example, in the spatiality epistemologies, you find phenomenological approaches. You find existential phenomenologies, and it's interesting for me, for my reading. I have no time to develop that, but how is connected this perspective and the perspectives of different peace, the energetic, moral, modern, and postmodern, with this spatiality. That is what I'm doing. It's not a concrete question, but it's, for me, it's important to develop what is the spatiality of this elicitive conflict perspective. That just want to comment that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, well, it's more, I hope it's more a comment than a question. I think it draws you back to the discussion of before the break, because in a way, in order to be able to answer your question, you as the author, as the asking subject, have to make clear whether you move within a transcendent or an immanent worldview. This is where it begins. And they have very different answers, because if you are in a transcendent perspective, it is clear that you imagine the human being as a skin-covered ego, because it is the vehicle that carries the eternal, never-dying, so free souls through the mundane sphere. Otherwise, it's not transcendent. Yeah. So therefore, this is a precondition, and this frames you. Whereas if you go into an immanent perspective, the answer is very simple, because then it is, you start from the presumption that the whole universe is one entity and there is no separation. So the human being might be an conscious potential entity, but not, it's an emergence, and it is not not separated from the rest of the world. So from the very fact, I think we had that, if I remember well, from the very fact that you breathe, you can learn that you are constantly connected to all around you. Yeah, I mean, this is in a way, this online teaching in times of COVID really gives us a different impression, because I'm here alone and I speak into a screen, but still I'm connected to the whole world, even if I'm alone in my house at the moment. So if we were in a classroom, it's very clear. We inhale, we exhale, and therefore, again, we learned a lot of that with Corona. I mean, other ones inhale what I exhaled and they inverse, and so we are turning around, and you cannot separate one from the other because we cannot stop breathing. And even if we stop breathing for a short moment, breathing through the nose or the mouth, our skin is breathing. So that means even in a moment when we willingly stop it, the body continues being connected to the surrounding world. And breathing is just one of the examples. Then it goes further. It goes with, well, since you talk about the environment, the biological, natural environment, of course, we are eating. Yeah. So what is eating? It is transforming existence, one form of existence, an emerged form of existence into another form of existence. And the act of transformation per se is life. Yeah, so I mean, since I live, I need food and I have to digest and process this food and to let go. And this process per se is life. Or is it an aspect? It's not life, the total of life, but it's an aspect of life. Yeah. So that means here it depends on from the perspective that you choose for discussing that. And clearly, well, since we are almost at the end, and I think it's important to emphasize that clearly, if you accept the elicitive approach, then you have made a decision, then you are in the immanent interpretation of the world. Yeah. So you cannot have elicitive and transcendent. I mean, you can use the elicitive still as sort of a structure, but it gets a completely different meaning if you transfer it into a transcendent understanding of the world, and you will find a lot of contradiction. There will be a lot of buts. Yeah. Okay. Enough. Good. Okay. Then Abdelghani, please.
Thank you, Professor. I don't want to take more time, but I'd like to ask you about your approach or your perspective concerning the last few slides and the question on the screen. Can I guess that you think that all the approaches or all as I asked Professor Martin before, reconciliation with the other, with oneself, with the transcendence, the 5 dimension. Do you think that they are interdependent, meaning that it's like a system gear, a gear system? The car can't move without a little gear. So I have to have the whole gears working with each other at the same time in order to go on. So do you think that each process or each different piece or each different reconciliation dimension, depending on the others, the other types, or we can achieve a reconciliation with oneself without reconciliation with the other, for example?
Yes, I think so. If I understand you well, you refer to energetic, moral, modern, postmodern pieces, right? Or peace out of harmony, peace out of security, peace out of justice, peace out of truth. And well, my approach here is I have to respect them all because they exist. So as a peace worker, and this is from where I came, I started as a practitioner and not ended, but in a way became a professor in theory, with a philosopher, if you want. Yeah. So, but the practical approach is they exist. If you go into the fields, in the different fields in the world, you find them all. Even those who seem to be pretty strange to yourself, but then it makes you humble because you realize that your concept of the world is a very limited one. And there are many more. So, and each of them has the right of existence. Therefore, all of them have to be respected. And because of that, we need the many pieces, because this one piece in which many people believe, they are contradictory. And it's very, very difficult to bring them on one page. So therefore, I would say, yes, in principle, all of them are relevant. There are a lot of overlapping aspects, but also a lot of separating aspects. And this requires this dance. And the elicitive approach is now the practical attempt to do this dance. So for me, the point here is not, is this elicitive conflict map? A map is never reality, we know. Yeah, it's not, and a map never claims to be reality. It tries to interpret reality. So, and this is an attempt, and I try to work with that. And I can tell you from my personal life experience that this works pretty well. So I could get along with that, but maybe I could get along with that well because I invented. So maybe somebody else says, well, that's a strange thing, and it does not serve me. This is not my experience. Also, my experience from students, former students who are doing now practical work, is that they apply it a lot and they try to play with it. And the advantage is that this is not a normatively, it's not dogma, but it is a proposal, it's a tool, nothing else. So it doesn't say that it is the truth. And if you use it that way, experience says, yeah, it works. And if you mean, because these things go together, if you mean whether what we see on the screen here, these different colored words, whether they are interrelated, yes, absolutely. You cannot have one without the other. You cannot separate a human existence. So you cannot separate my body from my mind. This is the anti-Cartesian statement here. Yeah, my mind is a function of my brain, or the neurosystem, if you like. And the neurosystem is part of the body. It is body. Brain is body. Yeah. So that means you cannot separate, as like Descartes wanted, separate mind from body, but they go together. So I can also not separate. This is a delicate debate that we have also in our university. So for example, can I separate my sexuality from the rest of my existence? Of course not. My sexuality is not, I cannot leave it in the armor. Yeah, so it always comes with me, and it even comes with me in the most inappropriate moments. So when I am a university teacher and I'm standing in front of the class, bad news, it is also there. And the point is not, I cannot leave it at home, but I have to learn to deal with it. And the same goes for emotions. Yeah, some questions, attitudes, performances of students make me very emotional, but I am not allowed to I am not entitled to let my emotions take me away. And the same goes my fantasies, my mental concepts, yeah, the stereotypes that I, of course, also am exposed to. And if I say I mean everybody. I mean, that's always the same for everybody. Therefore, my clear answer to your question is no, you can never separate these things. You always have to take it all together. And this is just a map that helps us as would-be conflict workers to prepare ourselves for action, to train certain aspects of our personalities in order to be functional when it is professionally required. And this is not far away. We don't have time anymore for going there. This is not far away, for example, from the training of therapists, of psychotherapists. They also have to start their career with a self-therapy, which is nothing else but exploring their own aspects in order to not be carried away by the pain or by the emotions of their clients. That's very similar. So we have to do that. And from my point of view, this is what I advocate, and many people don't share that. We in the universities, in doing our programs, we have to be merciless with that, because that's the last chance for the students to do it in their life before they impose themselves on others. So this was a long answer, sorry, but
okay. This is concerning the elicitive, the elicitative, and the other one, prescriptive, right? The same answer for both. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Professor.
Okay, then Sinat, last one.
Yeah, I want to ask about the two approaches. So which one is more sustained, the elicitive or the prescriptive? And can you give me a good example for each approach? For example, I don't know if I can take Germany and France as a good model for elicitive, and South Korea and Japan for prescriptive. And what about the dimensions, for the internal and external dimensions? Do you think in elicitive the internal dimensions are more to do in this approach? For example, the cultural, the religious, the political, and the external dimensions are more to do with other model, because I think it's a ready model, conflict transformation and more universe. So we can take into consideration the interest of the international community, regional community, settled scores, economic dimensions. So what do you think about all this?
Well, what I can say clearly is that international peace work, as we have now discussed it, you remember we started from when did peace studies come into existence as an academic discipline and so on. This all has to do with the experience of the 2 world wars and then the aftermath of the Second World War. And in that time, people clearly started with a prescriptive approach. They couldn't do differently because this was their way of thinking. So it was modern, postmodern, and this works in a prescriptive mode. And this also is understandable because it has to do with the history of the UN. What was the purpose of the UN? How have they been created and designed because of the experience of the League of Nations and the Second World War, the failure of the League of Nations in the context of the Second World War. So what we see is that the time until, I would say, the millennium clearly is dominated by prescriptive models. And the elicitive proposal that Lederach brought first time in 1995 was a result of the frustration with this approach. Because, I mean, these Mennonites, Lederach is a Mennonite, they were there in the fire line in the Bosnia War, and they were totally frustrated because with these approaches, with the terms of reference, with the manuals, with the codes of conduct of the UN, they didn't get anywhere. And then because they were a religious group and not a state-run organization, they took the liberty to say, people, we have to change our attitude. We have to change perspective. We have to try it in a different way. And the result was this elicitive proposal. This was welcome in those parts of applied and theoretical peace studies where immanent worldviews were at least accepted. So it is not a coincidence that, for example, Mennonites and Quakers, or going to the Muslim world, certain parts, streams of the Sufis accepted that easily, whereas mainstream Catholic or state-run or Protestant groups had a hard time with it because they think normatively in the transcendent way. And of course, there is also the routine. You know, the routine makes people lazy and they just do what they have always done. That's one of the problems of the UN. So therefore, it was a minority program. And then what you can see that in the way you asked is, since the idea was mainly taken because what Curl was influenced, the teacher of Lederach was from his family background a Quaker, and Quakers, yes, are Christians, but they think rather immanent. So they have a lot of, in their poetry and so on, there's a lot of images. By the way, I found also in some of the Muslim writings, there's a lot of immanent notions, at least, yeah, even if the concept as such is transcended, but still you can find it there. So and then Curl was very much influenced by Tantric Buddhism, by the school of the Dalai Lama, and he took a lot of the notions from them there. The same did Abraham Maslow. This one here is taken from Hinduism and Buddhism. Yeah, so that's old Indian tradition, and just brought into a Western language. But the rest, the whole concept is Indian. And therefore, what you can see if it comes to countries, what you said, I would say that in all the countries where immanent worldviews are mainstream, the elicitive concept is easily accepted and applied. And still, I'm grateful for your concrete question with Japan and South Korea, because they would also range here in this immanent worldview. I mean, Zen Buddhism is clearly immanent, and Taoism is a Chinese thing. But you have in these societies also very normative philosophies, like Confucianism, or the state Shinto concept in Japan. They are very normative and tend to go rather into a transcendent direction. Confucianism in a secular way, Shintoism rather in a religious way. But both have these aspects, and I would say that therefore these societies are not homogeneous. They have a certain understanding for the immanent approach, but they also have very strong notions of the transcendent. And specifically in China, I would say that the form of communism, the interpretation of communism that they live, is very much influenced by Confucianism, more by Confucianism than Taoism, and therefore you find also a lot of transcendent structures there. Yeah. So I mean, I would say it is not that clear. It's pretty blurred, but yes, there are areas where this immanent approach is stronger and more natural, whereas in others, I would say in Western Europe, there's a lot of resistance. Yeah, like in Germany, there's a lot of resistance. In Germany, there's even resistance against the French postmodernism. Yeah, this is very much rejected in most of the German universities. It's only French. Yeah, and you could never have the French postmodern philosophy without Heidegger or without Husserl or without Nietzsche, which are all German philosophers. Yeah, but they all are in a way exiled from the German mainstream. And I remember, maybe I finish with that years ago, I had a discussion, a public discussion on a panel with a very well-known German social democrat philosopher. And when I referred to postmodernism, he became very, very emotional. His head turned red and his voice loud, and he told me, "You know what you are doing? You bring Nietzsche back through the back door." Yeah, it is like this gentleman, 100 years after the personal drama of Friedrich Nietzsche, he still wanted to see this philosopher in the Swiss exile and not allow him to return to Germany. Yeah? So it is touchy. It is, and therefore, I mean, also we have a lot of problems with peace studies. It's not welcome everywhere. I mean, I don't know how many universities there are in Germany, and only 7 have peace studies. Out of, I don't know how many, maybe God knows how many they are. In Austria, Innsbruck, where I'm from, is the only one. Yeah, so it's a small country. And, yeah, so this is all not so free of problems. Yeah, so if you do peace studies, prepare yourself for life in troubles. This is maybe the last thing that an old man can tell you before I finish. Yeah, so yeah, I have to finish. I'm sorry for being late, but we also started very late today. Yeah, this is my last session with you. I'm a bit sorry that we couldn't address a lot of things that we could. I hope that you enjoyed it in a way. I hope that you challenge the professors who are going to come a lot with these things and make it a discussion. This is what science is there for. Yeah, we have to interact, we have to argue and try to find new solutions by falsification of old errors. And I don't say that this is the ultimate truth at all. So yeah, I hope that it was inspiring for you until here. and that the colleagues from Jena can somehow build on that. And yeah, there's a lot more to say. I'm not sure how we are going to continue with the Armena project, and maybe there's a chance that we continue with this debate in another semester. We have a meeting with the colleagues from Jena, well, right now after the lecture, and maybe we will find conclusions how to deal with that, and we will inform you. Yeah, any case, thank you for your attention in spite of this electronically reduced version of the lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Dietrich.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
so we will
you.
meet in 5 minutes, professors. Professor Liner is with me, so I'll just add it in 5 minutes. So you'll have some break a little bit. Yeah.
Yes,
We
quite
can't
fast.
hear you, Professor Dietrich. I cannot hear you.
Hello.
Okay, yes, 5 minutes is okay. I drink a glass of water and I will be back.
Okay, and
Great.
use the other link because this link is recorded for the Erasmus Plus program. So that's why. So we have to get out from this link and use the link I sent to you by email. If not, I send it again.
You send me a new one.
Send again.
Okay.
Okay,
Good.
bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Yad.